Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are jumping right back into our Vintage Business Wisdom series. This is the stack where we blow the dust off the books that really built the modern world, just to see if the advice holds up in 2026.
It's one of my favorite projects. There's something really grounding about realizing that the problems we face today, scaling, mindset, market saturation, they were being solved pretty aggressively over a century ago.
Absolutely. And if you were here for the last deep dive, we got into P.T. Barnum's The Art of Money Getting. That one was very, very practical. It's all about thrift, integrity, that kind of hustle.
The golden rules for making money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But today, we're taking a bit of a hard left turn.
We are. We're moving from the purely practical into, let's call it the mechanical metaphysics of wealth.
We are unpacking The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace D. Wattles, published in 1910. And I have to admit, when I first saw that title, I was expecting a really dry manual on, like, compound interest or something. But Wattles comes out just swinging. He basically says getting rich isn't a possibility, it's an exact science, like algebra.
And that's the hook, isn't it? That's what's kept this book in print for over 100 years. He's not offering tips. He is claiming there are actual laws governing how you acquire riches. And if you follow these laws, if you do things in what he calls a certain way, getting rich is a mathematical certainty.
It's deterministic, which is a massive claim. But before we try to turn our bank accounts into a math equation, we do have some business to take care of.
We do.
This episode of Vintage Business Wisdom is brought to you by AISupportSquad.com, a 24/7 AI phone agent that answers calls, books appointments, and even participates in the sales process so you can focus on creating abundance while the AI handles the details. Visit AISupportSquad.com to supercharge your business with modern tools that align perfectly with timeless wealth principles.
Creating abundance, that is actually the perfect segue into Wattle's first big argument.
Let's do it. Because he starts with a concept that I think still makes a lot of people uncomfortable, the right to be rich. He doesn't just say it's okay to want money. He says you have a moral duty to be rich.
He really doesn't tiptoe around it. Wattles argues that the whole point of life is development, evolution, and for a human being to fully unfold your soul, to develop your talent to its absolute peak, you need resources. You can't be the best version of yourself, mentally, spiritually, or physically, if you're broke.
I highlighted this one line. To unfold the soul, one must have things to use, and money buys things. It just cuts right through that whole idea that poverty is somehow more noble.
He flips it completely. He says desiring wealth is just the desire for a fuller, more abundant life. It's the life force seeking expression. So it's actually abnormal, that's his word, not to want to be rich.
It's like the modern self-optimization movement. We all want to optimize our health, our knowledge, our experiences. And Wattles is just saying, look, you can't really do that if you can't afford the tools. Okay, so I can get behind that. Resources help us grow. But then he gets to the science part. And this is where he starts debunking all the usual excuses for why we're not rich.
He does. He just uses observation to strip away all the variables. He looks around and asks, is it environment? Well, no, because you can see a rich man and a poor man living side by side, same city, same business.
One succeeds, one fails. So it's not the location.
It's not the location. Then he comes for the talent excuse. He sees, and I quote, blockheads getting rich while geniuses stay poor.
I think we all know a few of those.
Sadly, yes. And then he even attacks thrift. He points out that misers often stay poor while free spenders get rich. His conclusion is that wealth doesn't come from saving pennies or from being the smartest guy in the room. It comes from doing things in this certain way.
Capital C, capital W. So the big question is, what is this certain way? And this is where the book gets a little woo-woo for a minute. He calls it the monistic theory.
Right, and we have to touch on the metaphysics because his whole system rests on it. Wattles believes there's a formless stuff, an original substance that makes up everything. It's the raw material of reality.
It sounds a bit like, the quantum field or what modern manifestation people talk about.
It is the grandfather of the law of attraction. His core idea is that this substance is thinking stuff. A thought that you hold in this substance produces the thing that you imaged.
Okay, but here's where he really diverges from the whole sit on the couch and wish for it idea.
Yeah.
He makes this distinction that I think is maybe the most valuable part of the book. The creative mind versus the competitive mind.
This is the pivot point. If you get this, you get the entire book. He says most of us operate on the competitive plane. We think supply is limited. If I get something, that means you don't.
It's a zero-sum game. We have to fight over the same pie.
And Wattle says that is fundamentally wrong. He says you have to get rid of the idea of competition completely. You're here to create, not to compete for what's already made, because that formless stuff is infinite.
So you don't need to take from anyone. You can just create new value.
Exactly. He even talks about the trusts, the big monopolies of his day, and says not to worry about them cornering the market.
How does that apply today in 2026?
Well, a competitive mind looks at AI and says, oh no, AI is going to take my job as a graphic designer. That's scarcity. That's fear.
And a creative mind.
A creative mind says, okay, how can I use these new tools to create a level of service or art that's never existed before? You're not fighting for the old slice. You're just baking a whole new pie.
So you're not trying to win market share. You're creating a new market.
Yeah.
That actually feels like a huge relief. It takes the pressure off. You don't have to crush your competitors.
Exactly. When you compete, you scramble. When you create, you tap into that infinite supply.
Okay, so we've got the mindset. Creative, not competitive. How do we actually do it? How do we interface with this thinking stuff?
He gives a roadmap, and it starts with being really, really specific. Vague desires just don't work. You can't say, I want to be rich.
You have to know what the rug looks like in the room you want to be in. The specific details.
Right, and it's 3 things. A clear mental picture, a fixed purpose to get it, and this unshakable faith that it is already yours.
The faith part. That's where people get tripped up. How do you believe you're rich when you're holding an overdue bill? I mean, isn't that just delusion?
He calls it taking possession mentally, but there's a connector. There's a mechanism that keeps it from being just a daydream. And that connector is gratitude.
I was so surprised by how much emphasis he puts on gratitude. I usually think of it as something you do after you get something.
Wattles flips it. He says gratitude is the scientific mechanism that keeps your mind in harmony with that creative energy. If you're not grateful, you drift into dissatisfaction. And what are you focusing on then?
On the lack, on the problems, on what you don't have.
Exactly. And because the thinking stuff creates what you focus on, if you focus on the common, the poor, and the squalid, well, you attract more of that. Gratitude keeps you focused on the best, so you get the best. You're grateful in advance.
Okay, now what about willpower? This section really surprised me because most sales gurus are all about imposing your will.
Dominating the room.
Yeah, and Wattles is totally against that.
Completely. He says never, ever use your will on other people. Coercion is just wrong, whether it's mental or physical. You don't use your will to force a sale, and you don't use it to force the universe to give you things.
So, where do you aim your will?
Only at yourself. You use your will to compel yourself to think the right thoughts and to hold that vision.
That is so much harder. It's way easier to boss someone else around than your own brain.
It's the hardest work there is. He admits it. He says it takes being a mastermind to think truth when the appearances show poverty, to look at an empty bank account and see abundance. That takes immense willpower, but that's the work.
Right. So I'm visualizing, I've got faith, I'm grateful, I'm using my will on myself, but this feels like a danger zone. A lot of people just stop here. They make a vision board and wait for the checks to show up.
And that is absolutely not it. This is the big pivot in the book that separates Wattles from just magical thinking. He calls it the missing link, action.
By thought, the thing you want is brought to you. By action, you receive it. That quote really stuck with me.
Yes. Thought gets the forces moving, but you have to be active to actually receive what's coming. And he's so specific about how to act. He just says, act now.
Meaning, don't wait for the perfect time or the right environment.
Don't wait. Act right where you are. But here's the nuance. He warns against what we would call hustle culture. He talks about efficiency.
Right. It's not about doing a million things. It's about making every single act an efficient act. What does that actually look like in 2026? Give me a concrete example.
Great sales call. An inefficient act is making 50 calls while you're distracted, you're worried about your quota, you're doubting the product, you're just projecting fear.
And getting nowhere.
An efficient act is making one call while you hold that vision and faith. You're present, you're confident. You aren't trying to coerce them, you're genuinely offering them value. That one call has more power than the 50 frantic ones.
Because your mind and your action are aligned.
Perfectly aligned. And if every single act you do is a success in itself, the total of your life has to be a success. It's just math.
Let's move to his business strategy, because this is pure gold for anyone in sales. The impression of increase.
This is such a profound psychological insight. Wattle says the basic impulse of all life is to seek more life. We all want to be more, do more, have more. We all want increase.
So how do we use that?
In every single interaction, you have to convey that you are giving the other person increase. They have to feel like they are advancing just by interacting with you.
He uses that old-timey example of the Eskimo and the gun.
Right. It's a bit dated, but the logic is perfect. It's about use value versus cash value. You can't give more in cash value than you take. That's bad business. But you must give more in use value.
The actual utility they get from your product or service has to be worth more than the money they paid.
Exactly. The feeling of advancement they get must outweigh the cash. That's what keeps clients coming back. If you're a consultant, they don't just get a report. They leave the call feeling smarter, feeling more capable, feeling like their business is growing. That's the impression of increase.
And you have to embody it yourself. You have to be an advancing man or an advancing woman.
Yes. Success is contagious. If you are clearly growing and moving forward, people are drawn to that. They feel they'll advance just by being in your orbit.
It's the ultimate vibe check. If you give off stagnation, people run. If you give off growth, people buy.
And you do it in every interaction, even, he says, selling a stick of candy to a child. You put the thought of increase into it.
I do want to touch on the cautions he gives near the end, because for a guy who says get rich, he has some really strict boundaries.
He circles right back to that competitive mind. He warns against seeking power over other people. The desire to domineer is from the competitive plane. It's not creative, it's destructive.
And then there's the part that's probably the hardest for news junkies like me. He says, ignore poverty.
Yeah, this is probably the most controversial part of the book. He says, don't read the muckrakers, don't dwell on pessimistic news, do not study poverty, even if you're trying to be charitable.
That sounds incredibly callous. Just don't look at the suffering.
On the surface, it does. But his logic follows from his premise. If thought creates reality, then filling your mind with images of poverty only creates more forms of poverty. You can't help the poor by thinking about being poor. You help them by getting rich and showing them the way.
It's the oxygen mask theory. Put yours on first before helping others.
Exactly. He wants you to focus entirely on the world becoming rich. It's an extreme mental diet. But if you believe thought is the creative force, it's the only logical conclusion. You fix a problem by focusing on the solution, not the problem.
So let's try to distill this whole philosophy down. What are the key takeaways we can actually use?
I think we can boil it down to 4 main points.
Hit me with number 1.
Shift from competition to creation. Stop looking at your competitors. Stop fighting for scraps. Look at the infinite supply and innovate. Create new value.
Number 2.
Hold the vision with purpose and faith. Get crystal clear on what you want, decide you're going to get it, and then believe with every fiber of your being that it's already on its way.
Number 3 is my favorite.
The impression of increase. In every single interaction, make the other person feel like they have gained more life, more value, give more in use value than you take in cash.
And the last one, the missing link.
Efficient action in the now. Don't just dream, act. But act with poise and power in the present moment. Do all that can be done today and do it perfectly.
It sounds so simple, but that's a lifetime of practice right there.
It is, but as Wattle says, it's an exact science. If you do it, the result is certain.
Well, I'm going to go work on my impression of increase. That wraps up our deep dive into Wallace D. Wattles' The Science of Getting Rich. If you want to make sure you don't miss our next piece of vintage wisdom, please subscribe and turn on those notifications.
You really don't want to miss what's coming up next.
Oh, absolutely not. Next time, we are diving into Harold Morse Dunphy's incredible 1893 guide, 1,000 Ways to Make a Living.
It is, and I mean this literally, an encyclopedia of practical and sometimes just bizarre ways to generate income from the 19th century.
And you'd be surprised how many of them still inspire hustlers today. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep advancing.